The Chicago skyline stretched endlessly across the horizon, a masterpiece of steel and glass bathed in the golden glow of the setting sun. Lights flickered to life across the towering skyscrapers as the city stirred, waking from its brief slumber. From the 26th floor of Sterling Financial Group, Michael Carter stood at his office window, his reflection blending into the cityscape beyond. He lifted his coffee to his lips, taking a slow sip of the black liquid. The bitterness settled on his tongue, a taste he had long since come to prefer. He liked his coffee the way he liked his life. Strong, regimented, and devoid of unnecessary sweetness. His world was one of order, precision, and careful control. Every moment of his day was accounted for. Early morning reports, back-to-back client calls, meticulously planned investments, and dinner with his wife, Laura, at precisely 7:30 p.m. Their marriage was not a whirlwind of passion, nor a battlefield of conflict. It was stable, predictable, functional. And for Michael, predictability was a comfort. In a world where fortunes could rise and fall in an instant, he found peace in routine. He turned toward his desk, where a neatly arranged pile of files awaited his review. Everything had its place. Everything had a purpose. And for 6 years, he had believed that included his marriage. That evening, he arrived home later than expected, the familiar scent of lavender and vanilla greeting him as he stepped inside. Laura's fragrance, soft, elegant, and unchanging. From the kitchen, he heard the quiet clink of a wine glass against the marble countertop. "You're home late," she remarked, swirling the dark red liquid in her glass. Her blonde hair was gathered in a casual bun, a few loose strands framing her delicate features. "Long day," he replied, loosening his tie. She smiled, briefly, effortlessly, before glancing at her phone. And then in one smooth motion, she locked the screen and set it down. It was a tiny movement, a fraction of a second, barely noticeable. And yet, Michael noticed. He had built a career on his ability to read people, clients, coworkers, competitors. He could detect the smallest hesitation in a handshake, the slightest waver in a voice. He understood the weight of unspoken words. And yet, somehow, he had never thought to study his own wife. A strange feeling stirred in his chest, an instinct he wasn't ready to name. He shrugged it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. "I need to check an email," he said, reaching for his phone. The screen remained dark. "Dead battery," he sighed. "Can I use your phone for a second?" he asked, his voice casual. Laura hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Then, with a light laugh, she handed it over. "Sure. Just don't go snooping through my texts," she teased. Michael didn't laugh. He opened her email app, quickly locating the contract he needed. He was about to return the phone when his fingertip accidentally brushed across the home screen. A folder appeared. Private memories. His breath slowed. His pulse did not. It was probably nothing. A folder of old photos. Perhaps a collection of family pictures. And yet, every instinct he had honed over years in finance, the ones that had never failed him, told him to look. His thumb hovered over the folder. Then, in a single motion, he tapped it open. The screen filled with hundreds of images. At first, they seemed harmless. Laura at a restaurant, Laura at the beach, Laura in a luxurious hotel suite. Then his stomach twisted. She wasn't alone. In nearly every photo, a man stood beside her. Tall, dark-haired, handsome in an effortless way. A man Michael had never seen before. The timestamps weren't from years ago. They were recent. His fingers tightened around the phone as he scrolled faster. Laura raising a champagne glass with the man. Laura walking barefoot along the shore at sunset, her arm wrapped around his waist. Laura laughing across a candlelit table, her eyes filled with something Michael hadn't seen in years. His breath came in sharp, uneven bursts. This wasn't just an affair. It was a double life. Every year, on her birthday, Laura had told him she was visiting her parents. Every year, she had smiled at him, accepted his gifts, kissed him goodnight, all while spending her real birthday with someone else. His fingers trembled. He wanted to stop looking, but he couldn't. The betrayal was a blade, sliding between his ribs, twisting with every photo. He backed out of the folder, his mind a whirlwind of calculations. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding. But the time stamps didn't lie. Neither did the photographs. Michael turned to Laura. She was still sipping her wine, completely unaware that the foundation of their marriage had just crumbled beneath them. He clenched his jaw. Now was not the time to erupt. Now was the time to think, to plan. Because if there was one thing Michael Carter never did, it was lose. Slowly, he set her phone down. His mind was already moving, analyzing, strategizing. Across town, another betrayal was waiting to be unraveled. The corruption that tied Benjamin Reed to his crimes was undeniable. Michael had been gathering evidence for weeks, documents, transaction records, confidential emails. He had known Reed was dirty. He had known Ashwood Capital was crumbling beneath the weight of its own deception. And so, he did what needed to be done. He drafted an email, not to police, nor to a lawyer, but to someone with far more power, a rival firm, one that had been waiting for an opportunity to destroy Ashwood Capital. Now, he was handing them a loaded gun. The message was short, cold, efficient. He attached the necessary files. Then, without hesitation, he pressed send. Just like that, Benjamin Reed's downfall had begun. Laura had thought she was secure. She had thought she could play this game forever. She had underestimated the man she married. She had no idea. She thought she was playing the game, but in reality, she was the game, and I was about to end it. The next morning, I woke before Laura, the room still cloaked in the dim glow of early morning light seeping through the curtains. Even as my surroundings remained quiet, my mind was sharp, honing on what was to come. Today was the day it all unraveled. Moving swiftly and silently, I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom. The cold water I splashed on my face didn't just wake me up, it centered me. My hands were steady, my breath controlled, my thoughts calculated. Laura stirred slightly in bed, but didn't wake. That was fine. By the time she opened her eyes, her world would already be in flames. I checked my phone as I rested against the sink. No messages from Derek yet. Not that it mattered. The wheels were already turning. Benjamin Reed didn't know it yet, but his career, reputation, and financial empire were about to go up in smoke. And Laura, she would have no choice but to watch it happen. By the time I arrived at my office, the storm had begun. The moment I stepped into the grand foyer of Sterling Financial Group, I could sense the shift in the air. Conversations were hushed. Phones were clutched tightly. Brows furrowed as people scrolled through breaking news. Something was happening. I didn't need to ask what. Ignoring the buzzing tension around me, I strode toward the elevator and rode up to my floor. Once inside my office, I sank into my chair, exhaling slowly as my phone vibrated against the desk. A text from Derek. Turn on the news. Reaching for the remote, I flipped to a financial news channel. And there it was. Breaking news. Investment consultant Benjamin Reed under investigation for insider trading and fraud. A slow, satisfied smirk spread across my lips. The story was everywhere. Reports detailed leaked evidence of offshore accounts, illegal financial maneuvers, and confidential client data being exposed. An official investigation was already underway. Ashwood Capital, once his strongest ally, had swiftly severed all ties with him. Benjamin Reed was finished. And this was just the beginning. I took a sip of my coffee, letting the moment settle in. Laura's perfect little affair had just imploded. And I knew exactly what would come next. The panic, the desperation. Sure enough, my phone rang. Laura. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my tone deliberately casual. Morning. Her voice was shaking. Michael, have you seen the news? I feigned mild curiosity. Something about Ashwood Capital? Sounds messy. She let out a sharp, uneven breath, like someone struggling to breathe. She was terrified, not just for Benjamin, for herself. Michael, I need to talk to you. Her voice trembled, almost pleading. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying this moment. I'm at work. Can it wait? Silence. I could practically hear her mind racing. Please, she whispered. Just meet me for lunch. It's important. I let the silence stretch between us before answering. Fine. 12:30 Mottos. A high-end Italian restaurant. Neutral ground. Thank you, she breathed before hanging up. I set my phone down, my gaze drifting back to the news ticker scrolling across the screen. Benjamin Reed had lost everything in a single morning. And Laura, she had nowhere left to hide. At exactly 12:30, I walked into Motto's. Laura was already there, seated at a corner table, her fingers clenched together on the polished wood. She looked up the moment she saw me, her eyes searching my face. For what? Pity? Forgiveness? She'd find neither. I slid into the seat across from her, taking my time as I unfolded the linen napkin, smoothing it onto my lap with deliberate patience. So, I said, lifting an eyebrow, what's so urgent? She swallowed hard. Michael, I need to tell you something. I tilted my head slightly, feigning curiosity. Go on. Her hands trembled as she reached for her water bottle, gripping it like it was the only thing keeping her together. I made a mistake, she whispered. I kept my expression unreadable. A mistake. She took a shaky breath, her gaze darting around as though searching for an escape. I got involved in something I shouldn't have. Benjamin. He wasn't who I thought he was. She hesitated, swallowing hard. He used me. I let the silence stretch, watching her unravel. This was exactly where I wanted her. Desperate, afraid, helpless. Used you how? I asked, leaning forward slightly. Her lower lip trembled. I thought it was just a relationship, but he had me sign things. Transfer information. I didn't know what I was doing until it was too late. There it was. The confession. Not just to the affair, to the crime. I exhaled slowly, tapping my fingers against the table. That's unfortunate, I murmured, voice calm. Because I assume you know what happens next. Her eyes widened in terror. Michael, you were complicit. I cut in smoothly. Whether you knew or not, you assisted him. You sent financial data, signed illegal paperwork. And now, I leaned back, watching realization dawn in her face. Now it's all coming to light.